Good afternoon, and welcome to the November General Meeting of the League of Women Voters of Champaign County. Today, we are going to be talking about a postmortem of the Champaign County election results, and maybe a little wider into the state of Illinois. We are joined today by Tom Kacich, long-term political reporter, and by Gordy Hulten, the current Champaign County clerk. Gentlemen, if you want to introduce yourselves a little bit more and get started.
Yeah.
Age before beauty.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I've worked at the News Gazette since 1975, and my first beat was right in this room, sitting over there, covering Urbana City Council meetings when people really covered Urbana City Council meetings. There was somebody there from the Courier and the News Gazette and WILL and WDWS and TV, and now I don't know if anybody goes to the council meetings, but yeah, so I've been around a long time.
My name is Gordy Hulten. I'm the Champaign County clerk for 16 more days. About 8 days ago, I was unceremoniously fired by the voters of Champaign County, so this will be, in Tom's words, I think you said this about Chad Hayes when Chad Hayes gave an interview after he resigned from the State House. This will be as liberated a discussion of politics and election administration as you will ever hear. So,
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, anything's on the table. I brought some election results that I'm happy to talk about. I will give you the caveat that I got my butt beat pretty bad last week. So if I really knew what I was talking about, I probably wouldn't have got my butt beat pretty bad. So take everything with a giant grain of salt. But like I said, I don't have an agenda anymore. I'm not a candidate for office. Can't imagine that I'll ever be a candidate for office again. So I will try to give you as unvarnished the truth as I can possibly give within the constraints of course, my own knowledge and perspective. So,
Yeah, he said he got his butt beat. I don't think it was his fault by any stretch, or any of the other Republican candidates. I think a lot of it was Donald Trump, and it trickled down the local races. And the Republic, like I said, and when I wrote last week, I don't think the Republicans lost this election. I think the Democrats won it. The turnout was just phenomenal. So.
and my opponents here, Darlene, our county executive-elect, and I had a nice talk with Darlene on election night and congratulated her for her victory. She ran an excellent campaign and was a class act throughout. And I'm proud to have lost to her if I'm going to lose to anybody, and I wish her the best. And we've talked a little bit about trying to make the transition easy for her, and then I've talked with county clerk-elect Aaron Ammons, I think every day since election day, to try to make his transition into the office as smooth as possible. He joined us yesterday for our post-election audit / retabulation. Tom was there for a while as well, so we're trying to give him the information that he feels like he needs so that he can step into the county clerk's job and do as good a job as he can do, being relatively new to the position.
It was really heartening to see Gordy offer and Aaron take it up, and they worked together. They did some retabulation, some hand counts by themselves. This is the way it's supposed to be. As Dick Franks, who used to be the city administrator here in Urbana, said after a big election in, I think, 1978, it's not a revolution, it's just an election.
Just an election.
So, it doesn't feel that way to the losers, I'm sure, but this is just the way things go normally.
I've had a saying for years. I used to write it on my blog back when I had a blog, that elections have consequences and we get exactly the government we deserve. And that is true whether you are really happy with the election result or it's true whether you're really, really disappointed with the election result. It's like the old, I think it was King Solomon who said, this too shall pass, right? It's true if you're on top of the world or it's true if you're at your lowest of lows. So Tuesday's election, I guess I should be clear, last Tuesday's election in Champaign County was historic. There were 79,000 plus ballots cast already. We have about 600 more potentially left to count in the county clerk's office. There are not enough outstanding ballots to change any margins in any races, but we count all of our late arriving vote by mail and overseas ballots regardless of whether we have close races or not. That 79,000 votes is by far a record for a midterm election in Champaign County. I think the previous record was about 55,000. So I'm going to break my own arm, patting myself on the back a little bit. I believe that's 5 out of the last 6 elections in Champaign County where we've broken turnout records. So for all of the discussion of voter suppression, if I was suppressing the vote for the last 8 years, I was really, really bad at it. because we've consistently broken voter registration and turnout records in Champaign County, and I'm very, very proud of that and very proud of the team in my office that helped to make that happen. About 35,000 of those 79,000 votes were cast prior to Election Day, either by early voters or vote by mail voters or nursing home voters or one of those categories of voters, which left about 45,000 votes to be cast on Election Day. There was a little bit of a substantive difference between the two sets of ballots. I think I just handed my spreadsheet over to Tom that has the results from our first unofficial summary that were released on election night, which was just the early and vote by mail ballots, including Election Day vote by mail ballots, including the vote by mail ballots that we got back in the mail on Election Day. I guess I should be clear about that. So of that 35,000 ballots, I think, for example, I was losing by 19,000 votes. 19 points, about 7,000 votes. And the final margin in my race was about 5.5 or 6 points, which means I won the Election Day votes by about 2,000 votes. And I say that not to say, boy, I came close and I was almost there, but there is a substantive difference in the political outlook of those who vote early and by mail versus those who vote on Election Day. For whatever reason in Champaign County, your pre-election vote, especially in higher turnout elections, we saw this in 2016 as well, your pre-election votes tend to be more Democratic. Your Election Day votes tend to be more Republican. The difference in this election wasn't enough to save me, but that's been a consistent thing that we've seen since early voting and voting by mail has gotten so popular in Champaign County starting in 2012. Early voting and voting by mail continued to grow in popularity in Champaign County. We had the highest rates in the state coming into this election. I expect that when the books are closed, we will continue to have the highest rates in the state. I think that makes us an ideal candidate for some experiments in how we conduct elections in Champaign County, but I will leave that to the county board and the next county clerk and the state legislature to decide what experiments we should try. I think we're ripe here in Champaign County to experiment with vote centers and universal voting by mail. Vote centers being a concept that I think we talked about the last time I was here, where we would run significantly fewer voting locations, but run them all for a portion of early voting and on Election Day and make them all universal voting locations so that anybody can show up and vote at any location. Maybe say starting on the Thursday before the election, run it through the Tuesday of Election Day, so run it for 5 straight days or 7 straight days or whatever you think is sufficient for demand. Make them all universal, and instead of staffing them with 2 laptops and 5 judges, staff them with 10 laptops and 15 judges so that when you get the sort of demand surges you saw at the University YMCA or the Illini Union, we're better equipped to handle those levels of demand. Our experience at the Illini Union for this election, we had 4 stations checking in voters during early voting, and so for 11 days of early voting, that was sufficient, including our busiest day on Friday where we had like 900 early voters. On the Monday before the election, we got up to 1,100 early voters, and that created a line, and those 4 judges were never able to bust that line back down, even though they were able to handle 900 judges without a line, or 900 voters without a line. So there's a very fine tipping point. So then on Election Day, after the union decided to offer us the second room across the hall, we added another 4 stations. So we ended up with a total of 12 judges there running 8 stations. We had a line again on Election Day, but the line on Election Day moved much, much more quickly than the line on that last day of early voting, because we just hit that tipping point and we couldn't crack it back down. And then we had a line at the University YMCA. University YMCA was not a universal polling location, which means the only people who could vote at University YMCA were the voters from the 2 precincts assigned there. We had initially started out with 3 stations at the University YMCA. We surged a 4th station there when the line formed in the morning. There was no more physical space in the building to add any more judges or stations, and so we unfortunately just had to sort of tolerate that line for the rest of the day, and that was a long line. There were candidates and volunteers who got together throughout the day and tried to relocate some of those voters to some of the universal locations that we run on Election Day, including Leonard Center, Church of the Living God on North Champaign. They generally didn't bring those voters over to the Illini Union because there was already a line at the Illini Union. Those were the 2 big problems I think we had on Election Day.
Yeah, and I can't remember which day it was that I went to campus, whether it was Monday, the day before the election, or Election Day, that I went over at 9 a.m. And there was a good line at the Union, but it was moving pretty quickly, and people were saying I'd only been in line for 15 or 20 minutes. So I went to the front of the line and asked the people there, how long you been here? 15 or 20 minutes. I went over to the YMCA, and there was nobody there. It's just, it's, yeah, they just awaken late or they put everything off. I mean, I remember doing that when I was that age, but if we could just encourage them to come on Sunday or Saturday, so.
Well, and we've talked for years about, with the advent of Election Day registration, where you can show up and register and vote all in one step, that's a slower transaction than somebody who just shows up to vote. And so when you have a surge in turnout combined with a very high percentage of your voters who are doing registration and voting at the same time, creates the danger for lines. And we've tried to educate our voters in Champaign County, and we tried to warn them explicitly, especially for the presidential election. We did less of it this time, and I wish we could have done more. We've warned them that if you wait until the last possible minute and you need to register and vote, you run the risk of standing in line yourself, and you also run the risk of creating a line for the people who are coming after you. So we tried, that was one of the things we did in 16, especially to try to push people to vote early or vote by mail more. Was to explicitly warn about the possibility of the line, especially if you need to take advantage of registration. And the University YMCA was, I think, one of our higher proportions of people who were taking advantage of registration. And I love our election judges. Many of you have served as election judges. If you've done so in this age of Election Day registration, you know that doing the data entry of somebody's name, birth date, gender, driver's license number, or the last four of their social, finding and locating their street address, waiting to generate the correct ballot code to make sure you get the correct ballot, that can be a 3-minute transaction for me, and I do this all the time. It can be a 5 or a 6 or a 7-minute transaction for an election judge who does this once or twice a year. And we try to send our most technologically savvy election judges, especially to our campus precincts, to try to get through that process as quickly as we can. But sometimes when a line forms, we just weren't able to break it down this year.
I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm the one with the mic. Can you compare the turnout in this midterm to previous presidential election cycles? And also, can you tell how many more on-site registrations you got this year versus an average election is about the same?
So I'll let Tom take a stab at turnout too. The record that we set in 2016 for a presidential election was about 92,500 ballots cast. So this was almost 80,000. We'll be real close to 80,000 by the time we're done with this election. So it was just a little bit less than record-breaking presidential turnout. I think 2020 we will break another record. The systems and the mechanics are just in place now where voters realize they can wake up on election day, sometimes wake up on election day afternoon, wander into a polling place and register and vote all in one step. And so I think we're going to continue to see those surges that we've seen in voter turnout. And then, you want to say anything about turnout?
Just for an off-year midterm election, the last 4 previous races we had in Champaign County, all were the turnout was always between 53,800 and 55,434. It was very consistent, all in the mid-50s. And all of a sudden, we blew up to 79,000 this year. And then compared to presidential elections, this was fewer than 2016, but is actually a greater number of voters this time than the 2012 presidential election, the last Obama election. So this is really off the charts.
And in terms of the numbers of voter registrations that we did during early voting at voting locations or on election day, we haven't finished our audits. We haven't scanned signatures and updated voter history, so I can't. I've had people ask about demographics of the electorate in terms of, how many people between 18 and 25 vote. We can't do any of that until we finish all of our processing of votes and then update the actual voter database with the little V after your name that indicates whether you voted or not.
Do you have any information about what percentage or how great the numbers are of students who voted by mail?
I do not. We do not actually track whether or not somebody is a student when they vote, when they register. So we sort of track campus turnout by the geographic area, but that's a very imprecise measure because, as you know, Close to campus, you have a very concentrated undergraduate student population, but graduate students especially live throughout the community and everywhere. We have 10 precincts, City of Champaign 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8, and Cunningham 2, 3, 4, 5 that we generally consider to be the core campus area. I think this election you probably should throw Cunningham 7 and 8 into that as well, because the campus area, the population of the campus is growing and it's spreading out into the community a little bit more. So.
Was the increase across all precincts or concentrated in some areas?
For the most part, we had near presidential level turnout across the county. The percentage increase was significantly higher on campus. Those 10 campus precincts in 2014 cast a grand total of 1,600 votes. This time they cast 8,000 or 9,000, I think. I haven't actually gone and looked at precinct numbers since last Tuesday night because it was a little depressing to go look at it. So.
Yeah, I use a little different, I'm more generous, I guess, in what I consider campus. And I count 12 precincts. That may be wrong, but I think that's where, maybe a majority of students
you had
are.
Cunningham 7 and 8?
Yeah, and and 9, maybe.
7, 8, so that'd be 13.
Yeah, so I've got 11,000 voted this time versus 2,600 4 years ago. And again, every precinct in Champaign County had a bigger turnout this year than 4 years ago. Every single precinct, no matter how Republican or how Democratic or how rural or urban, it was phenomenal.
It really was?
So I have a quick question for Tom. We've talked about the numbers on Election Day, but can you make any comment about the difference in the campaigning season this year in Champaign County?
It just was dwarfed. Everything was dwarfed by the governor's race. I think there was just so much. If we're just talking about TV and radio, the campaigns themselves. I'm not as close to it now as I was, so I can't tell. It seemed to be pretty civil. It was just bigger. It was just like, and Trump is a big part of it. I mean, we cannot escape that. And to look ahead, I don't know what the Republican Party is going to do in Champaign County in 2020 if that guy's still at the head of the ticket. Because he's an anchor here. I mean, he might be great in Southern Illinois, but here he's killing them.
Anybody else got a question?
I spent a lot of time helping people register to vote with paper before the deadline. Do you have any, did that process work real well from the county clerk's office point of view, or the ways you would change that? Because my friends and I that were doing this kept gathering stacks. We'd immediately get them over to your office. Is there any comment you'd have on that process? I'm curious because I did it.
From our perspective, we'll take voter registrations any way we can get them. Our preferred way is to get them through the online portal that the State Board of Elections runs for a couple of reasons. First is that we don't have to decipher handwriting, so the information we get is significantly more accurate. The second is that the voter is immediately validated in terms of matching their name and birth date and eventually address with a driver's license number or a social security number. And so when we get an online voter registration, there's no need for the voter to show ID when they go vote. And that also usually then on online voter registration will also be accompanied with an email address, which allows us to communicate with the voters directly from our office and give them things like a notification that they can apply for a vote by mail ballot or a copy of their sample ballot or a reminder that early voting is starting or election day is here. And this year, especially with all of the concerns about misinformation around elections, we try to be very careful to make sure that we're providing not an oversaturation, but timely, relevant information to our voters directly from the election authority so that they don't have to rely on information from a third party that might not be entirely accurate. So we prefer online, but we'll take them any way we can get them.
Yeah, we made an effort to we read each one after to see that it was readable. We always made sure to get an email. So if there's any other ways we can improve
That's very helpful. An email address with the paper form allows us to then follow up with the voter if we need additional information. Yes.
I want to congratulate you on getting the second space at the Illini Union. How difficult is it to get space there in the first place, and why does it have to be on the 4th floor?
So this was an issue of some controversy, and we asked for space in the Illini Union immediately following the primary. And we had worked through the Illini Union staff and the space requisition process, and they have a process that they go through where their spaces are made available to for Illini Union functions first, and then registered student organizations second, and then I think other university functions third, and then I'm an outside group, and so we're last in line. So when we made the space request in March, they gave us two options: a smaller space on the 2nd floor or a larger space on the 4th floor. We wanted the larger space because we knew we wanted to run more judges there than we had in the primary. So we took the 4th floor option. That was the only option available to us. Previous years, we'd had a space in the basement. That space is not available any longer because it's being used as a consequence of all of the renovations that are happening to the residence halls. They're using that for storage and for some other functions. We asked for the large ballrooms. Those were not available, in part because they're being used as dining halls for the folks who live at ISR. And
Plus, you're asking for 11 days, right?
and we're asking for a solid block of time. You know, we probably could have pieced something together where we moved the room around, but all of our research indicates that there is a value to having consistency in terms of the location. I was very grateful that the chancellor noticed the line on the Monday before the election and did whatever he needed to do to make that second room available to us. But we never even had a hint that there was another space, an additional space available to us until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. And we took it as soon as we could get it, and then we spent the rest of Monday trying to piece together the additional election judges that we needed to staff it, the laptops, the printers, all of the supplies, so that we could open it on Tuesday morning for Election Day and try and move people through there more quickly on Election Day.
One of the things I noticed in a write-up of that that I had never thought about, it said that you all, because of the voting security, you need some capability of locking some of your stuff down. Could you address what election security is when you think about all these different precincts? I think of churches, et cetera, et cetera.
So normally, once we begin voting at a location, we want to be the only ones who have access to it. So in the Illini Union, for example, they actually rekey the rooms for us. And the only people who have access to it are us and then emergency personnel. That's a difficult thing to ask the Illini Union to do to the Pine Lounge. Especially, you know, I've gotten requests or comments post-election that, you know, we should secure the Pine Lounge now for the presidential election. Normally for the presidential election, we run off-site early voting locations for 2 solid weeks. The union can't give us the Pine Lounge for 2 weeks. They do Board of Trustees meetings in there, student government. I mean, the union is a very, very busy building. It's also old and not designed with particularly modern needs in mind. I mean, they've made it ADA compatible as best as they can. There's an elevator up and down to the 4th floor, but a space on the 1st floor for 2 solid weeks is an enormous ask. And we don't pay rent. They donate it to us. And, you know, they're in the business of recouping their costs where they can, and we're an enormous burden for them. And so as I told Tom when this issue first came up, we ask nicely, we take what we can get.
Why does it have to be the union? Surely
State law designates the Illini Union as the campus early voting location for the University of Illinois. They also designate other buildings for other campuses around the state.
So might it be possible to start, you know, not you obviously, but I mean start working on getting that changed? If it's not an appropriate one and you can't get in the queue,
So
it sounds like you had a challenge and you tried to deal with it, but
Tom, you want to take that one?
yeah, thanks.
Well, it was interesting because he was talking to Aaron Ammons about this yesterday, and all the things that that could be done to clear this up through the statute. And he was joking about if we had some connection with a state legislator in Champaign County. So
the Illini Union was picked by the legislature and designated as a result of the controversy surrounding early voting on campus in the late 2000s. And if you you may or may not remember, I think it was the governor's election in 2010, the last election that was conducted by my predecessor. There was a state requirement to conduct early voting on a property on the University of Illinois campus, and the location selected was at Gregory Place, which many people thought was inappropriate because it was not visible enough. So the legislature went back
Plus, it
and
was
changed the
owned
law
by a
and said
Republican.
it must be in the union. And so to undo that union mandate means that the legislature is either going to have to designate another building, or going to have to trust the election authority in Champaign County to a greater degree than they were willing to trust my predecessor or me.
And one of the points he made yesterday, you open up one little bit of the election code, and everybody else wants to jump in there too, and it becomes a big Christmas tree, and it's hard to negotiate with all the legislators on what belongs in there and what doesn't. So.
Yeah, a couple things. Every member of the General Assembly is an expert in election administration because they've all run for office and won. So they all know how to serve as an election administrator better than the people who serve as election administrators. So that's one of the challenges with working with the General Assembly on election-related legislation. The other thing I would say is Tom did an interesting thing leading up to the election and during the election. Hour-long waits for early voting are commonplace in Illinois and the other large municipalities. The Chicago Board of Elections, for example, posts on their early voting page that the only location where you should expect to wait less than an hour is if you go to their main office. All of their remote locations, they just upfront tell you, you should wait for more than an hour during early voting. But here, because it's a political thing, any wait of more than 15 minutes on election day or early voting, is evidence of intent of voter suppression, and not evidence of incredibly healthy turnout among voters who have chosen not to register until the moment that they show up.
And I think I added this correctly, but I'm really math challenged at times. But the remote sites, including the union, were open for 78 hours before Election Day.
Before there was a line.
Yeah, 11 days, 78 hours. So there were all kinds of opportunities for people to vote, and they did it in all these other remote satellite locations, but it didn't connect on campus.
And I'll say this again, I've said it for years, Champaign County voters have greater access to early voting than any other voters in the state of Illinois. We have more locations per registered voter than any other location in the state of Illinois. And we do that of our own accord. We have a state mandate that says we must run early voting at our office. We have a state mandate that says we must run an early voting location in the Illini Union for a total of 4 days. We ran it for 12. We do an additional 7 locations because we think there's demand for it and because we like the relief that early voting provides for us on Election Day. Everybody who votes early is not somebody who's standing in line on Election Day. So we think it's good service, and we think it's also good for everybody else who waits. But this notion that somehow we, specifically designed our early voting operation to suppress this or that demographic is just politics.
So given that there was a huge increase in voter turnout this year, and given that there's a presidential election coming in 2 years, what would you recommend to your follow-ons?
I'll give you the same answer I gave to Tom when Tom's tape recorder was running yesterday and as we were doing retab. Aaron won, Aaron Ammons won, and any advice that I give to Aaron will be between me and Aaron, and I'm not presumptive enough to think that Aaron needs or wants any of my advice either. He is going to be the election authority for Champaign County, and those are his decisions to move forward. The election code gives election authorities an enormous amount of latitude when it comes to early voting locations and schedules. The extra stuff that we do here for early voting, we do on our own authority because we think it's a good idea, not because the state requires us to do it. And so if the new clerk wants to change that or expand it or contract it, that is entirely his decision.
I heard on WILL radio about some homeless people who had problems voting. There was some confusion on the parts of judges. And so my question is, that just made me think there might be ways that you tweak the training of judges. I went through the training, and I thought it was just fantastic. It was really good, thorough, solid prep. But things come up, and so I wondered, that's my question. Are you tweaking, are you going to recommend changes to the training for judges?
I'm not tweaking or recommending anything. I will say the controversy that surrounded voting by homeless folks in Champaign County, I believe, was a little bit manufactured. Our training, as you went through, was very clear that in order for someone to register and vote on election day, they need to provide proof of who they are and where they live. And we are very expansive and generous in terms of what we will accept, especially in terms of verification of residency. The statute says that we are required to, one of the things that can satisfy the residency proof is a piece of recently delivered mail. Well, we interpret that as if you will show us on your smartphone a shipping confirmation from Amazon, we will accept that as recently delivered mail. So we are incredibly generous in those regards. For homeless folks, they can claim residence at a homeless shelter, or they can use the Cunningham Township office, or a service provider can be their address of record, but they still have to have documentation of it. Somebody was brought to our office, didn't have that documentation. The person who brought them to the office wasn't willing to serve as a supporting witness to verify their residence, and so they were asked to come back with their documentation. That turned into Gordy is refusing to allow homeless people to vote, even though we had dozens, if not hundreds, of homeless folks vote throughout the early voting period in Champaign County without issue.
So, are you expecting much staff change and actually election coordinator changes? I'm worried about institutional knowledge going forward to the next election.
As am I. The new election authority will have carte blanche to change sort of the way. So, election day coordinators are roving troubleshooters who have served our office in Champaign County, and we assign 8 or 10 polling places to a coordinator, and that coordinator floats on election day. And especially first thing in the morning, make sure everything gets set up and running appropriately. If there's an issue during the day, they are a frontline troubleshooter who can be there faster than we can send somebody from the office. They get a little bit of extra training. We hand select them from among our best election judges. They've been an incredible resource to us, and I hope that tradition continues. A lot of counties use something like that, but call them various things. I hope that tradition continues, but that will be up to the new clerk. And as for staff changes, I know that I'm leaving, and I know that Chief Deputy and the Director of Training are not coming back. And beyond that, that will be between me and my staff or the next county clerk and his staff.
Yeah, it is something to worry about because there is a lot of institutional knowledge there. And this has been a Republican office for like 80 years in a row. So,
but the folks that work there don't have, they're not, there's no patronage hiring other than my chief of staff is the only person that I had a pre-existing relationship with before I hired them. And my chief of staff, all the chief of staffs for all of the county offices understand that when the elected official goes away, the chief of staff goes with the elected official. So that is a personal member of the staff. But everything else, there is no, it's not as if the Republican Party staff in the county clerk's office is going to get cleaned away and replaced with a Democratic staff. Most of the folks in the office are part of the AFSCME bargaining unit. They've got collective bargaining protections. Yeah. Some may choose to leave. Many, I hope, will inevitably stay and pass their institutional knowledge along for the next administration.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Gordy.
Hello.
Hi, Dwayne.
I, for one, I'm not alarmed by the agitation about voter suppression or the publicity. I'd rather we don't go to riot and disorder.
Agreed.
But you don't have to look too far back in the history of Champaign County and some other places I've been where we have seen efforts to discourage student voters in large numbers. and where the idea that certain classes are the voting classes and we needn't concern ourselves too much about the others have been rules. And we see a lot in the national press about states, individual states having issues with voter suppression. The thing that, one of the reasons I'm glad to see the publicity and the agitation. Look, the University of Illinois, everybody will agree, has an interest in the processes of government working, including voting. We can't say that the University of Illinois is an ivory tower adrift in some kind of vacuum or sea of placidity where what the public thinks of their officials doesn't matter. It bothers me that the university can be so cavalier, year after year after year, month after month, about, oh, well, you can have an extra room on notice a week ahead of time. I'm not so happy at variously states of feeling about the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, certainly two agencies that have a lot of interest in voting and are complaining, find occasion to complain. I say keep the publicity coming, bear the agitation and the inconvenience, and let's be more proactive about educating the public. I don't have a suggestion about how it could have been done better. Agreed. We're really in a time of technical transition, aren't we?
I would agree. I'd also say, to touch on your last point, that we attempt to do as much as we can within our budgetary constraints in terms of educating voters. We do significantly more, I think, than any other jurisdiction in the state of Illinois in terms of our email and digital communications. We mail a red, white, and blue 3 ways to vote postcard to every new registered voter in the county and anyone who has ever voted early or voted by mail to encourage them to vote early or vote by mail. We do all of those things, but when folks like Tom retire and the News Gazette scales back its local coverage and the TV stations are increasingly nationalized and syndicated, it was a greater challenge this year to communicate with voters about local election administration than it had been in previous years. Some of that, admittedly, was understandable hesitation on the part of media outlets to give me publicity because I was also a candidate for office. So, I didn't do my normal series of DWS interviews leading up to the interview because DWS rightly said, Gordy, we can't have you on to talk about the election because you're a candidate for office and that's not really fair. I get that. But there has to be a way to talk with voters about, hey, please don't wait until the last minute to register and vote. And we have to be able to do that in a way that reaches them where they consume media, and that's increasingly tough with local media being less prominent and media consumers being more scattered.
Yeah,
all over the place.
Did you notice, I've done Quad Day for many years, and it's almost to the point where whether we're in a coming election year or not, there are organizations that are out there to register new voters. Did you notice any upturn in new voter registration in August?
No, voter registration activity actually was trailing behind 2014's voter registration in the weeks leading up to Election Day. That's a predictable consequence of Election Day registration being available. As people get used to Election Day registration, there is less and less incentive to register to vote ahead of time. Nobody does any interaction with the government until they have to. Even an office as wonderfully run and flawless as mine. And so if you know you can procrastinate and show up at the polling place to do it, you do it. Or if you want to do it during early voting, you can do it. And so our voter registration data we track to try to get a feel for demand. Our voter registration data was actually one of the earliest indicators we had that the 2016 primary was going to be a record breaker. But for this election, it actually lagged the 2014 midterm in terms of the weekly daily voter registration activity that we were seeing leading up to the election. So,
I have a different topic.
yes, ma'am.
One of my bugaboos is people not really, and something I'd like more education on publicly all the time, is the difference between being political and being partisan. There are so many organizations that, like my service organization, Rotary, who is so worried about being partisan that we don't talk to school board candidates, we don't talk to candidates for offices or anything. And how the heck are they? Well, it bothers me greatly, and that, people have all kinds of chances to be informed, and they really are language compromised, and not knowing the difference between political and partisan. And I know I had early started talking about that because the League of Women Voters is a political organization. We are not partisan. And that we all, as a populace and citizens, if we're going to reclaim our country to be what it should be, what it was started out to be, we have to be able to be better informed. That's my LWV speech for today.
And
Thank you.
if we feel insufficiently informed in Champaign County, imagine what it's like in Douglas County or Cumberland County or DeWitt County, where they don't have a local media presence at all. We have our own TV stations, radio stations, we have our own newspaper, but the media landscape has changed so much in recent years that it's so fractured. It's difficult to get people to report on the sensational stuff that happens in the community, let alone the sort of mundane, hey, there's an election coming up, here's your list of polling places, if you want to register to vote, here's how you do it. That doesn't bleed, so it doesn't lead.
Boy, is that the truth.
Even in a community where we have our own media outlets.
Yeah, so I think some of you may have heard this gripe before. At work, we have a list of the top stories at this very moment that people are reading, and it's never about an election debate it will be about the results for a day after the election, but it's never about an issue or a debate or a big city council vote. It's always about who was killed on I-74 or who was indicted or who was arrested for something or which restaurant is opening in Marketplace or, it's just like, oh, Jesus, this is terrible. This is what people want to read. All right, that's it for me.
I just wanted to start out by saying that as someone who, well, first I wanted to say that my husband works on campus. He's an administrator on campus and tried to vote probably a week prior to the election, and the lines were so long the week prior that he left.
We had no lines at the Illini Union longer than 10 minutes prior to the Friday before election day. The Friday before election, we had lines that were 15 or 20 minutes, and then we had long lines on Monday and Tuesday. There were no lines at the Illini Union starting on October 25th, leading up until November 2nd.
Okay, I'll take that back to him and kind of revisit that issue. The second thing I want to say too, though, is about the cost of elections. And I want to ask a question because I also was at the polls myself and noted printers that were jamming, observed a tabulator that was a little persnickety. And I just wanted to talk a bit about the quality of the election machinery that exists in Champaign County, and would love to hear you talk a bit about your efforts to update new equipment, given that we have 12-year-old machines as was debated a bit during the election. So could you talk a bit about the process that you have gone through to try to update our election technology?
This is a softball for Gordy. You just put it in his wheelhouse.
So we've been fortunate in the Champaign County Clerk's office that the county administration and the county board have been receptive to our requests for resources to do the things that we need to do in terms of our election administration. Like I said, we do extra for early voting, for voting by mail, and that takes capital and it takes equipment and it takes funds, and the county board has been very responsive to us on that. So any shortfalls that we've had in terms of our equipment or other things are our fault, not the county board's, and I'm not passing the buck by any respect. So we are aware of an issue with the tabulators that we use for early voting. the ones with the bigger screens if you've early voted. They are newer. They are 2012, 2013 era technology versus the smaller screened ones that you see at your normal polling place, which are 2002 era technology, which are getting old quickly. The early voting machines, when you feed a ballot into them, they grab the ballot a little bit abruptly. And if you are a first-time voter, which is most of our voters at the Illini Union, they are a little surprised by that grab. And sometimes they hold on to it a little bit too long, and so the ballot will twist or turn and then jam. We sent preemptively for this year 2 tabulators to the Illini Union, cognizant of the fact that inevitably one of them was going to jam at some point, and if it jams, we just want to be able to route people to the next one. So we tried to be proactive about that. But that is from my experience, having staffed the Union early voting location for about 20 hours this election, that is mostly a user-generated issue. The issue with the printers is, to run early voting the way that we do in Champaign County, we need to be able to print ballots on demand. So we send pre-printed ballots to the Illini Union, for example, for the ballots for the precincts that surround campus most closely. But if somebody wanders into the Illini Union from Mahomet, we have to be able to print a ballot for them from Mahomet. Our election vendor offered to sell us certified ballot printers made by Oki, enormous machines that weigh several hundred pounds that cost about $2,500 a printer. For the Illini Union, when I say we send 8 stations, that means 8 laptops and a printer for each laptop. So obviously $2,500 a printer, sending 8 to the Illini Union, and then a minimum of 2 to every one of our additional early voting locations, plus having backups in case one goes down, that's just not economical. So we played around with various printers over the years and settled on a little $99 black printer made by a company called Brother that will do legal-sized paper, double-sided, which is what we need. When it does it very quickly, it does it very economically, but it introduces a little bit of a curl to the ballot because it flips it over and prints on both sides. That ballot, when you feed it into the tabulator, if it's curled this way, it will tend to jam more often than if you feed it in this way and it curls down into the tabulator. So we try to get our election judges, especially at the Union, let your voters know to put the ballot in face down. The tabulator can technically read it any direction, but that curl matters. And the printers are $99 printers. And if you've ever owned a $99 printer, sometimes they run out of toner very quickly. We send a half a dozen or more packages of toner to every one of the early voting locations. We're required to use this special kind of paper, which is a little bit heavier weight, so it's a little bit more wear and tear on the printer. But we try to send enough stations that if a laptop or a printer goes down, we can shift the line to the other stations and continue with voting and nobody notices. Again, for 11 days or 10 days of early voting at the Illini Union, if a printer went down, nobody noticed. When we had a line, if a printer goes down, suddenly the line gets longer and longer. We've got to rush additional equipment or replacement equipment to the Illini Union to try and replace it. So we spent what we thought was appropriate. We have tried to be good stewards of the dollars entrusted to us by county government, but we were not in a position to spend $2,500 a printer.
Yesterday, either I or Aaron asked you how much would it cost to just reboot, redo everything. All the election equipment you said, I think.
About $1.5 million for Champaign County.
Yeah. So the county obviously can't afford it. But one of the things that the Dems, the House congressional Dems are talking about is a big election reform.
In Springfield.
No, I'm talking about U.S. too.
US, okay.
They're talking about redistricting reforms and getting some money out to, possibly getting some money out to election authorities to upgrade their election equipment, which would be a great thing.
Most of our election equipment was bought with federal grant funds through the Help America Vote Act. They were called HAVA funds that were passed through state government and then to us in 2003, 2004, and that's what bought us the initial batch of optical scan tabulators, many of which we still use at polling places to this day. Those HAVA funds have not been renewed over the years, except for suddenly, in the wake of the 2016 election, Congress appropriated a little bit of money and a new batch of HAVA grants sent to the state, again to us. We are not allowed to use them to buy tabulators or poll books or anything else. We are only allowed to use them to purchase election security related expenses. Because that's the hot topic in election administration right now. At some point, everybody's election equipment is all going to die at the same time because it was all bought at the same time, and the feds are going to have to step in with money to replace it, or the state is going to have to step in with money to replace it, or the federal government is going to have to remove the requirement that election equipment must be federally certified, which in effect eliminates competition in the election equipment market and means there's only 3 or 4 manufacturers nationwide who will sell election tabulation equipment. And I'll also note before you have your question, in Champaign County, again, the county board's been very appropriately generous with election administration. We've tried to buy new tabulators in the odd numbered years when we only have 1 election versus the even numbered years where we have 2 elections and it's more expensive. So that's as we've purchased those new tabulators, we use them as early voting locations. And we eventually hope to have enough that we could, if we had a wide scale failure of our regular tabulators, we would have enough new ones that we could replace them. So we've tried to do our own piecemeal thing here, and I think we're actually ahead of the curve compared to most jurisdictions in Illinois where it concerns our election equipment. Sorry.
Well, I just want to go back to the ballot box, putting the ballot in. I voted early because I thought I might need help.
Okay.
So the ballot was easy and it didn't have too many things on it. But when I got to the ballot box, I couldn't put my ballot in.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I was early, it was empty, and I asked the person I was voting at the county courthouse.
Okay.
And the person came out, and I said, I can't put my ballot in the box. Well, neither could he. He couldn't put the ballot in the box either. About the 5th or 6th try, he got the ballot in the box. I don't know what the problem was, but there was a problem.
I don't either. We processed about 10,000 early voters at Brookins, and the vast majority of them, the ballot went into the tabulator on the first try. So I'm sorry that it didn't work on the first try for you. I hope you have a better experience next time.
It was strange.
So you brought up election security. I understand the way our ballots go in the counters. They're not connected to any kind of computer system, so they're secure. So what does it mean here in Champaign County for election security? What goes into that? I am very, very naive about what that means.
So the last time we visited, I talked at length about the 2 different systems we have, so I'm not going to talk at length about them this time, but we have 2 systems. One is the voting system, which is the ballots and the tabulators and the computers that generate the ballots. That system is completely offline. Never touches the internet, never touches a computer that touches the internet. In fact, when we read results off of those machines, we use a thumb drive to then move those results over to a computer that is connected to the internet so we can post them to our website, and then we throw that thumb drive away. That thumb drive never even goes back the other direction. We call that an air gap. So we have a significant amount of confidence that our election voting system is secure. The primary concern in Illinois and in Champaign County is our voter registration system. That database that we have that has your name, your birth date, your last 4 of your social, your address, your driver's license number, that's all a very target-rich environment for identity thieves and or somebody who, for example, would want to alter or delete voter registration data to try to create chaos with an election. And so that voter registration system is online. It is persistently connected to the State Board of Elections, which then shares data with other states and other counties in Illinois so that we can remove voters who are registered somewhere else. Securing that system is an expensive and difficult proposition because it's consistently online. And as you continue to see stories in the media about Bank of America being hacked or Citibank being hacked or remember, if your credit card and or bank can be hacked, anything can be hacked. If it is connected to the internet, it is vulnerable. We think our voting systems are more safe because they are never connected to the internet, but our voter registration system is absolutely vulnerable. And protecting it to the latest and greatest and best practices is an expensive and ongoing proposition and still isn't foolproof.
And it was hacked.
And the Illinois State Board of Elections was hacked in 2016 in a very high profile. The most successful election-related hacking in 2016 targeted the Illinois State Board of Elections. Yeah. Voter registration system, not vote counting, voter registration.
We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Anybody have anything?
Does anybody want a resume? Thank you for having us. Good questions, good discussion as always. Look forward to seeing many of you around the community. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know.
So thank you all for attending. Yes, by all means, give our panelists a round of applause.